Hi, Shaylee. Welcome to What's Your Next podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. My name is Shaylee Thompson. I just released my debut novel, How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates, which is a slasher rom-com. So I have always been a writer, but my day job for a very long time was a high school drama, English, and literature teacher. Yeah, my debut novel came out early February, and it follows Jamie Prescott, who is a film academic and cinephile who goes to a speed dating event with her roommate. And during the second last day of the night, there's a blackout. And when the lights come back on, her date has had his throat slit across the table. And then the novel unfolds into a slasher and a rom-com. When everyone gets locked in the venue, there's a killer on the loose, but Jamie still has a bit of a connection with two of her dates from earlier in the evening.
So we got to talk about what was the process of writing this book because you have an extensive knowledge about slasher films, rom-coms, also balancing both plot lines that are they're very genres but are defined by formulas and specific things, and then
Mm.
balancing both plot lines in a way that will make sense for a reader. And
Yeah.
keep it all in one room, in one specific setting that creates this intensity of that storyline.
Yeah. So like you said, I have always I grew up in the 90s, so rom-coms were very kind of foundational within my film education, I
Mhm.
think. I came into horrors and slashes a little bit later in the game. So I started getting into them in my 20s because of a really good friend of mine. She is a huge horror fan. And at the beginning of our friendship, we started watching horror movies together. So I got into that a little bit later, but I love them too. And so basically, I was writing in a completely different genre. I had never written horror before, but then I saw a screenshot of a tweet that was complaining about how there was too many Christmas rom-coms and not enough Halloween rom-coms. And my brain just immediately went
Yeah.
to horror rom-com. I don't think that's what they were asking for, but there you go. That's how it was born. And originally it was something that I set as a challenge for myself because I thought that they were two kind of diametrically opposed to go together. I was like, how are you going to be able to have two people falling in love in a situation like this? And it was a little bit different to dark romance as well, where the characters are kind of more, I think, maybe morally gray or morally black. So that kind of lends itself to that type of genre. So when I started writing, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I was like, I just want to see if I can do it. But I pretty much got obsessed with this story and with combining those two genres. And exactly like you said, they're one of the biggest criticisms for rom-coms and slashes is that they are very formulaic. For someone whose career is literally deconstructing text, it was kind of easy to have a look at those parts and then try to put them together like a jigsaw. So the writing itself, I would never say is easy, but trying to make those two genres work, I felt they actually lent themselves to each other very naturally. But I didn't,
Yeah.
because I knew the rules of them, I felt pretty comfortable breaking the rules of those genres as well. So I think that probably helped is if it didn't work, if a particular trope didn't work, yeah, I was pretty comfortable with breaking those rules. And then, yeah, I pretty much just let the story flow. And then if there were any kind of niggly bits of trying to put those genres together or something that didn't work, then I just went back in editing. A lot of the things were like editing Shaylee's problem and writing Shaylee just
Yeah.
got to do whatever she wanted.
Yeah. I love this idea of like really mashing and then breaking the rules because I think once you know the formula, you're like, okay, how can I play with it and how can I
Yeah.
take compromise? And it's not a dark romance, but it's a perfect. I love that it was released during Valentine's Day because it's like the anti-Valentine book, but
That was
it's
a very
perfect for the
purposeful
fall
decision.
too.
Mm. Yeah. Like we
Go
had the
ahead.
option of possibly releasing it the Halloween before. I am always going to be grateful for more time for editing and all of those sorts of things. But
Yeah.
yeah, it just felt like a good Valentine's, anti-Valentine's read to have as well. And then, I mean, you can pick it up later in the year, this Halloween too.
Yes, it's a equal opportunity because we do have a friendship. We do have a roommate situation, two friends going to speed dating, getting out of your comfort zone, which actually has that friendship Valentine's related, and then
Yeah.
trying to do senior car dating in this era. It's, oh, maybe this is like not so great. And maybe, yes, he should be unalived as far as the so let's talk about like your writing journey because this is your debut. I'm assuming you have been writing before, and this is just basically this is a book that actually got your debut, but it may not be the first book or the last book that you
No.
you've written.
Yeah. So I've been writing for as long as I can remember since I was a child. This whole process has made my mum go and, because she's like a big hoarder, go back and have a look through all my childhood albums. And she's found these writing samples that I did when I was like 7 or 8. But not, so yeah, this is my debut novel, but it's not the first book I've ever written. This is probably more like the 4th or 5th book that I've written. And it's not even the book that I'm signed with my agent with either, which is, it's
Yeah.
always the way, right? So I was kind of more within the contemporary romance, urban fantasy, rom-com kind of arena. I hadn't written horror before. I definitely hadn't written horror rom-com before. And I signed with my agent for a different book. But one of the first conversations that we had was whether that book was a debut. And at the time, I had already been writing How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates. So I pitched that to her and I was like, look, I'm writing a slasher rom-com and this is the concept. And we both felt that How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates was more of a debut novel than the other novel that I had signed with. I still have complete intentions to publish that as well, but it was the first in a series, and just with the way that the market was at that time, we were looking for something that was standalone and something that was going to be attention grabbing. Yeah, like I said, I've always been writing, but I kind of got more serious about it, like a lot of people did, I think, during COVID, where you had a bit of time to do some self-reflection and all of that. And that's when I started really editing heavily one of the novels that I've been writing. I started going to more writing workshops, listening to podcasts about writing, because even though I was an English and literature teacher, it's two very different worlds, basically. And I think writing and publishing are two very different worlds as well. So I just wanted to kind of get my head around that. And then, yeah, I did more workshops, applied to different programs, and just really tried to hone my skills, hone my writing process as well, because I'm a natural pantser. I just do these big brain dumps and then I have to put it into order. So the first novel that I wrote that wasn't a starter novel, the ones that never see the light of day and probably are a copy of one of your favorite books. The first novel that I wrote that was kind of original and more my voice took me about 10 years to write, whereas How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates took me about 4 months, 4 to 5 months to write that first draft. Yeah. And that was just me becoming a bit more disciplined, really not editing as I go, just allowing the writing process to happen and then going back and editing, like separating those two processes. So I think getting to this point was almost like a 4-year journey, because I started writing How to Kill a Guy in 10 Days at the end of 2023. But now I am a full-time writer and I get to do this every day for a living. And so I get to work on different things. I'm currently editing my second book, which hopefully comes out next year. Yeah. So it was a bit of a roller coaster, but it's always been, writing and creativity has always been something that I have done. It's just the last few years where I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is something that I want to do and put out into the world.
Well, congratulations on becoming a full-time writer. That's
Thank you so
amazing.
much.
That's a big accomplishment. And it's obviously it comes with its own purpose of having time and having energy, but at the same time, just working through it, which is its
Yeah.
own challenges too.
And I think time is the biggest resource.
Yeah.
Like, time is the biggest luxury when you're a writer.
Uninterrupted time that you can just write and just edit and everything allows you to play around with ideas and also being able to marinate those ideas because especially as a pantser, you're trying to plot, trying to like work through the problems and work through the plot. And so having time to go for a walk or doing activities that are actually going to get the mind marinating the idea that then
Yeah.
you get to write it quickly. Then you just have that, you have marinating that process for a while.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's the you're exactly right. Obviously it's the time to write, but it's the time to think as well. Sometimes I'll just go for a drive and I'll just drive around all the suburbs just to get the brain thinking. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I've got it. Drive home, start writing.
yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. I work in a field that requires a lot of thinking. And so one of the things when COVID happened was we requested to work remotely, not because there was expectation. It was like there's too many distractions in an office.
Yeah.
And we needed that place to have space to think and space to figure out, okay, find the idea, I find the solution. And it's a lot of it's boring your mind doing some repetitive tasks that allows you to figure out the problem, to problem solve.
Yeah.
So I love this. I am so excited for what more to come with you because I really love How to Kill a Guy in 10 Days.
That's a mouthful,
Impossible.
right? Look, I cannot wait. Everything is super secret about what my second book is at the moment, and I'm to blame for that. I'm like, nobody
Yeah,
tell anyone until we're ready to go. But I
that's
can't
okay.
wait. Like, I can't wait to be able to tell people because I literally like my publisher picked it up like on the title as well. So like, I can't wait for the title itself to come out
Yes.
so that people can see what it is.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. So let's talk some book recommendations. Talk
Hmm.
to us about what type of books do you tend to read?
I'm like I said, I was an English and literature teacher, so my kind of spectrum of books is really very wide. I love reading romance, obviously. I love horror comedy, but I also love the classics. So I will read Jane Austen's Persuasion pretty much every year in July. So in
Mhm.
Australia, July is winter. It's a bit cooler and colder, but for some reason, every
Yeah.
July I'm just like, boom, Persuasion. I'm also getting in more to nonfiction. I just read Scream with Me by Eleanor Johnson, which is a critical analysis of horror films from the 60s and 70s through a feminist lens, and it was amazing. But my book recommendations that I chose was kind of something along the lines of How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates. So if people read that and they want something that is kind of similar, but all of these books kind of came out before How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates. So it's very likely that people have already read them. So my first recommendation is, of course, Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. I loved reading that book through the lens of trying to pick up the Easter eggs and the references to some of the horror films that inspired the killers in there. That was really fun for me. As you can probably tell from How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates, I love meta. On that same kind of thread is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I had such a fun time with that book. Grady Hendrix got me into horror comedy, and I just love that in between the chapters, it's almost like an epistolic excerpts of movie reviews and articles and all different things like that. Again, the references to the classic slasher movies are just too good to pass up. And then finally, if you want kind of like a different genre, but you still want that meta aspect of it, I have to recommend Long Live Evil by Sarah Reese Brennan, where a woman is sucked into this fantasy series and becomes the villain within it and kind of has to use this kind of fragmented knowledge of the story to kind of go through that. And that came out, I think, about 2 years ago, and there's a sequel to that as well.
Oh my gosh, those sound so good. And I have to
Yeah.
give you a recommendation. I just finished this nonfiction, which is
Yes.
if you like just Scream movies, not your favorite scary movie, it's kind of like an oral history of the Scream movies, how it actually shifted the horror, all the movies, I think up to 7 until the latest one that's coming out. So
Yeah.
it's by Ashley Collins. The audiobook is excellent, but it's a really good homage to those 90s slasher rom-com from
I
I Know What
will
You Did Last Summer.
I will eat that up. Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get a little bit of taste of that Scream and why Scream worked and how they have revisited the franchise.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that one. It's like one of book. So it's perfect for how to kill a guy in 10 days. So
Yeah,
it's a
definitely.
perfect added on to your own date. Shaylee, tell us where we can find you online.
Yeah, of course. So I am most active on Instagram, and in my Instagram profile is links to my website and everywhere that you can get my book. So you can find me at Shaylee Writes. So at SHAILEE Writes. Yeah. So that's where I pop everything up, and that's the best place to find me.
Awesome. Thank you, Shaylee, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the What to Read Next. For more book lists, cozy reads, and library tips, visit the whattoreadnextblog.com. Your next great read might be waiting there.